So thank you very much for agreeing to speak with me today. Could you tell us your name and your position here in the village of Taybeh?
So هو أولاً شكراً إنه عم بتخلينا نعمل هالمقابلة معك، وبس بده يعرف الاسم الكريم وشو وظيفتك بهيدي البلد.
أهلا وسهلا فيكم. عباس سليم، رئيس بلدية الطيبة وعضو لجنة الأزمة اللي شكلتها وزارة الداخلية ومحافظة النبطية إلى لحل هالأمور ومساعدة الناس بالمنطقة بهالظروف الصعبة اللي عم نمر فيها.
So his name is Abbas Salim and he is the president of the municipality of the village of Taybeh, but he is also the president of this. He's not the president. I'm sorry. He's actually a member of this organization that was created by the minister of the interior minister of Lebanon to help out the people in the region and for emergency cases that happen during situations of emergency in the whole area.
How far are we from the Israeli border?
قد نحن بعاد من الحدود الإسرائيلية؟
بحدود 2 كيلو.
2 kilometers.
And are you from this area? You spent your entire life more or less in this area?
أنت حضرتك من هون وعايش كل حياتك هون؟
تقريبا.
So were you in this area, Taybeh, or some other village in this community, in this region, in the 2006 war against Israel?
لا ما كنتش هون، بس كنت مسافر بهذا السبب يعني بس.
So he's practically always been here, but in 2006 he was actually on a trip outside of Lebanon.
Mm-hmm. But have you yourself experienced military conflict between forces here in the south of Lebanon and the Israeli forces?
أنت قبل مرة كنت عايش بالطيبة هون وأجاك يعني عشت حرب بين هون رح نقول الأحزاب كلها والإسرائيلية قبل بمرة أو هي أول مرة؟
بطفولتنا يعني عم نحكي بقبل 82.
Before actually 1982. Yes.
And up until starting from October 7th, when there were these attacks in Israel, to the current time, so the last 2 weeks or so, could you tell us about what has happened here in this region in terms of military activity, shelling, how many casualties, how many civilians have been killed or wounded?
بده يعرف من وقت ما بلش الأحداث هالمرة يعني عم نحكي من هالجمعتين آخر هالجمعتين شو صار بالمنطقة هون؟ هل صار في قذائف نزلوا هون على المنطقة عندكم؟ هل صار في ناس استشهدوا؟ هل صار في أو بالمنطقة كليا أو بس هون بالطيب؟
هلا احنا بصعيد منطقتنا ببداية الأحداث تعرضت تلال العويضة إلى قصف إسرائيلي بدون سبب، يعني هي ضمن منطقة الطيبة العقارية وهي مشرفة على فلسطين المحتلة. تعرضت للقصف، الحمد لله إصابات مدنيين ما في. بالقرى امبارح بالقرية المحاذية لأنه رب 30 قصفوا منزل آبي والحمد لله الله يعني ستر وما راحش إصابات مدنية.
So actually during these events, first of all, Israel bombed a place on the hills. It's inside the region of Taybeh, but on the hills, but there was no casualties, no civilians were hurt or anything. And there was this building that is called
رب 30.
So it's actually called رب 30, which is also in the region of Taybeh, where a whole building was completely like fell down completely. But he says, thank God, nobody got hurt at all, no civilian were killed.
And what was the function of that building? What purpose did it serve?
شو هيدي البناية اللي قصفوها شو ليه قصفوها؟
مدني، بعدنا هلا ما عندنا إجابات. نحن بدي أقول لك شيء، نحن معودين على القصف الإسرائيلي من قبل التحرير بتاريخ الجنون، نتعرض دائما لقصف كنا همجي بدون أي أسباب يتعرضوا له المدنيين. لحتى صار التحرير وصار في المقاومة موجودة عندنا بالمنطقة، هي اللي صارت عملت قوة الردع لحتى الإسرائيليين ما يقصفوا المناطق المدنية وليس أي شيء آخر.
So, for this particular building, they don't have an answer yet. They didn't understand why it was targeted. And he said, you know, we live in the south of Lebanon, and even before the period of the liberation, so the 2000, even before that, we were used to be bombed for no reason. And it's when the resistance started organizing that they started protecting the civilian, and that's how they understood how to protect the civilians of the region.
المنطقة مثلا منطقة حولة كانت تعرضت لمجزرة كبرى، ومناطق تانية كتير كانوا الإسرائيليين يفوتوا يعبثوا فيها ويقتلوا فيها بدون أي سبب، بدون أي يعني نتيجة، وكانوا يقتلوا ويعملوا حالات رعب، حالات تخويف للأهالي. الحمد لله هذا الموضوع اختلف بعد قصة المقاومة والأسس اللي أسست عليها المقاومة من خلال الآليات اللي اعتمدتها بالرد بالمثل. صار في منع لهم يتمادوا الإسرائيليين بهذه الهمجية اللي كانوا يعملوها.
Before the liberation and before the resistance and all this period of 2000, a lot of region like the region of Hula that we hear also now a lot on the news, these regions were all the time attacked by Israeli forces. Not only attacked, but attacked also physically. They would enter, they would actually kill for no reason, kill civilians, kill etc. And when the liberation happened and when the resistance started being organized, they stopped the Israeli from entering these kinds of small villages and hurt the civilians. And for that they organized, but they also have now more weapons to use that to protect the civilians of the region.
وهذا كان سبب كبير للأهالي، حتى منهم مثلا أهلنا كلهم من جملة الأهالي اللي تركوا المنطقة بسبب هيدي حالة الرعب وحالة عدم الاستقرار، كانوا يضطروا ينزلوا على بيروت. فكانت نسبة الأهالي بالمنطقة هون كتير قليلة، وخصوصا بفترة الاحتلال، يلي عطى رجع العالم ترجع على بيوتها وترجع على منازلها وتعيش باستقرار نفسي ومعيشة، هو وجود الجيش اللبناني والمقاومة بهذه المنطقة.
Before the liberation and before the resistance, because everybody was really afraid, because there was a lot of terrorism in a way, and people were terrorized by the Israeli forces, especially during the occupation of the Israeli in the region. A lot of people left the country, they left the villages here and went to Beirut or to other countries. And it's only after the liberation and when the Muqawama, which is the resistance, started to organize, and also the Lebanese army started to organize in the region, that people started coming back because they felt safer and protected to come back to the regions. So that's where they started to be a bit more organized in the region. But before the resistance and before, during the occupation, a lot of people left their homes and the different villages.
I know he has limited time, so I just wanted to move on to.
عم بقول انه ما بده كثير، انه ما بده ياخذ كثير من وقتك، بس عنده كثير اسئله لك.
ياخذ راحته.
Take your time, Cesar.
Okay. So I also understand, not necessarily here in the Taybeh region, but in southern Lebanon and the border areas, that some journalists have been killed and wounded by Israeli forces in the last 2 weeks. What can you tell us about those attacks?
عم بيقول انه بهالجمعتين على حدود هون خاصة الممالك اللبنانية صار في كثير ناس وخاصة صحفية تأذوا واستشهدوا بهالجمعتين. ليه قولك شو فيك تقلنا على هذا الموضوع؟
نرجع للتاريخ. يعني الموضوع الأساسي هو وجود دولة لا تريد السلام بالمنطقة، محسومة.
قصدك الدولة هون أو
اليهود؟ الإسرائيليين خلينا نقول، حتى مش اليهود لأنه
أكيد
بيختلف الموضوع.
So he says we have to go back to history. You have a country, and that's where I asked. He said you have a government that doesn't want the peace, and I said which government are you referring to? And he said the Israeli government don't want peace in the region. So we have to go back to history in that.
يعني نحن عندنا نظرية هلا بهيدي الأحداث اللي عم تصير بعد أحداث غزة إنه الإسرائيليين عم بيحاولوا يستفيدوا من الأوضاع لإعادة الوضع اللي كانوا هن ما قبل تحرير. يعني لهذه السياسة العدوانية إنه هن وقت ما بدهم بيضربوا، وقت ما بدهم بفوتوا، وقت ما بدهم فهن عم يستفيدوا من هذا الوضع اللي عم بيصير بغزة لحتى يرجعوا الأمور لورا اللي كنا عايشين فيها. فعم بتصير هيدي الأحداث هلا بالمنطقة.
So he thinks, in his opinion, that the Israelis are taking advantage of the situation happening in Gaza right now to bring back Lebanon to the situation it was in before the liberation. And so to make sure that they could hit whenever they want, wherever they want. So they're taking Gaza as a just an example or something, or as a small. They're taking it for not for granted, but they're trying to take Gaza as a small excuse to attack here and to try to put Lebanon back before the resistance.
والدليل على ذلك انه هن صاروا من لما ترسخت معادله الشعب والجيش والمقاومه، هيدي العنوان اللي هلا عم بيخلي الناس تشعر بالامان وبالاستقرار بالمنطقه، هن عم بيجربوا يكسروا هيدي المعادله.
And one of the reasons, and it's actually the proof of that, is that they know now that the people feel safer because you have the Lebanese army and you have the resistance that are protecting the people, and people feel safer staying in the region here. So they're trying to break that and to break this safety to tell people, no, you cannot be safe because we are still here.
But just to focus, could you tell us the number of journalists? I want to just focus in on that. The number of journalists in the last 2 weeks in the south of Lebanon who have been wounded and killed by Israeli forces, and what you can tell us about the circumstances. How did that happen that they were wounded or killed?
بده يرجع على شغلة أساسية له، هو إنه هالجمعتين عم نحكي عن إصابات عند الصحفية، إنه كم صحافي انصاب أو كم صحافي مات وكيف صارت؟ ليه؟
هلا الإسرائيليين ما بيميزوا، هيدي محسوم، ما بيميزوا، ما بيحترموا لا الصحافة ولا رجال ولا حتى قوة الدولية اللي هي موجودة هون تحت عنوان مظلة الأمم المتحدة. والدليل على ذلك ما زرت أنا صار بقلب مركز الأمم المتحدة بأنا انقتل بحرب تموز 5 صينيين من قوات حفظ السلام بالخيم اللي هلا عم تشعل المشاكل.
So he's saying that the Israeli government does not make a difference between a person or another. Doesn't make a difference between a journalist or anybody else. And the reasons, and actually the proof I have and he's giving, are one, when the big massacre of Qana happened, the first massacre of Qana that happened in 1996, happened in a compound of the UN. And it was bombed. In 2005, there are actually 5 members from the Chinese nationality that were here under the UNIFIL or the UN that were also killed. They didn't make a difference. They don't make a difference between a person or another.
وهلا إذا بتيجي للإحصائيات، أكبر نسبة صحفيين استشهدوا وقتلوا على أيدي الإسرائيليين وعلى أيدي داعش.
So he said, if you see the statistic, generally, the biggest number of journalists who were killed were by the hand of the Israeli or the Daesh.
But in the last 2 weeks, which journalists, let's just put aside for a moment the Israeli government's attitude towards civilians, which journalists have been killed and wounded in the last 2 weeks in South Lebanon, to your knowledge?
بده يرجع للموضوع يقول لك إنه بهالجمعتين مين كانوا الصحفيين اللي قتلوا؟
الشهيد حسين العبد الله اللي من الأخير استشهد بشكل واضح وصريح من قوات الإسرائيلية، العدوان الإسرائيلي. وعندك الجريح اللي تصاوب هديك اليوم صحافي وكان بيرفقه واحد مدني معه كمان استشهد بمركبة. اثنيناتهم على ايد العدو الصهيوني، ما في عندنا غيره.
So there are two journalists who were killed on the hand of Israeli. First, the guy Abdullah, who is actually from the Khien, who was killed,
وكانت رويتر.
and he was actually covering for Reuters. And the second one in Markaba, who was actually killed, and there was a civilian with him that was actually killed also. So those, for his, like, he thinks that those are actually the two journalists that were killed with one civilian.
فيك تسأل زملائنا زملائك الصحفيين هلا بالمنطقة موجودين. امبارح كان في بحدود ال 60 صحافي وإعلامي عندنا بربع 30 عم بيغطوا. فيك تسألهم كيف التهديدات دائما من العدو الصهيوني.
He says you can actually ask your colleagues that are journalists that are here. Yesterday they had around 60 journalists that were this building that was completely destroyed in the region of Taybeh, and they will tell you how the Israeli don't make a difference between press or not.
كان بيناتهم فرنسيين وبريطانيين امبارح.
Yesterday there were French journalists and English journalists.
Can you tell me, let's move to the larger subject of what's happening now. Are you concerned? Do you feel, and the residents of this community whom you represent, how are they dealing with the risk of war, and are you concerned that this is going to escalate into a major conflict?
بدي أسألك شيء، يعني هلا بدنا نطلع شوي، بدنا نحكي عن شيء هيك أكثر أكبر شوي. بدي أعرف هيدي الحالة هلا، الحالة اللي عايشينها، أنت فكرك إنه هالحالة رح تتأزم زيادة، وكيف الناس اللي حواليك كناس عم بيعيشوا هالحالة، خايفين مش خايفين، خايفين إنه رح تكبر القصة كتير أو لا؟
يعني أول نقطة التكهنات بما سيحدث هذا مرتبط بالوضع الدولي والإقليمي، يعني السياسات الدولية والإقليمية.
So the first point, if we want to talk about escalating and everything, it's something that is more attached to the general, international, if you want, countries and around international countries more than the.
اللي بيبعث على التشاؤم إنه الأمريكان والغرب لهلا عم بيدعموا بشكل صريح وواضح الهمجية الإسرائيلية بغزة وبالمنطقة. أكيد هيدي حيخلي الإسرائيليين أكثر وأكثر يتمادوا بإطالة الأزمة وقتل المدنيين.
And the thing is, the Americans and the Western countries are pushing Israel to continue and are actually giving them the means to continue. And this is how and why Israel is actually killing a lot of civilians and not differentiating and giving them a lot of power to do that.
And so are the people here in Taybeh, are they staying put, or have most of them left? How are they preparing for the possibility that there is going to be a major escalation?
عم بيقول إذا هون بالناس اللي هون بالضيعة عندكم بطيبة، هل الناس عم بتحضر حالها لحرب أو عم بتفل أو خايفة إنه رح تكبر الأمور أو عم بتحضر حالها للأمور، أو كيف عم تكون الحالة؟
يعني حتى ما نكون واضحين، ما حدا بيحب الحرب وإطالة الحرب. يعني من الناس كلها هيدي تكون واضحة، يعني ما حدا بيحب إراقة الدماء، بس الناس اضطرت نتيجة التجربة السابقة. نرجع للتجربة السابقة إنه تكون حذرة كتير نتيجة الأحداث اللي كانت تصير سابقا من قيام مجازر وقتل المدنيين. بتخلي الناس تحتاط تاخد حذرها، وخصوصا بحرب تموز شفنا شو عملوا الإسرائيليين بالمدنيين وقبله هلا.
Sorry. So he said, we want to be very clear on one thing. Nobody wants the war. Nobody likes the war. Nobody wants to play with their blood. And of course, this is something that everybody, you have to be aware that nobody wants the war. But because a lot of things happened in the past, and especially in the war of 2006, a lot of people got hurt and all that. So people are, yes, preparing to protect themselves. and they're preparing to protect themselves, and they're preparing to see how they're going to defend themselves in a way or another.
أكيد نحن كبلدية معنيين بالمجتمع المحلي بهيك ظروف. عملنا لجنة أزمة طبعا بالتنسيق مع وزارة الداخلية والمحافظ، وعم نخلي المرضى، عم نخلي اللي ما بيقدر، يعني كبار السن، واللي لازم نخليهم حتى ما نتعرض لأي مشكلة صحية. والإسرائيليين معودين عليه، بيضرب مراكز صحية، بيضرب أي مكان عام لجوء، يعني ما عنده رادع. فصرنا عم ناخذ حذرنا قد ما فينا. اللي ما عنده شغل لازم يبقى هون ينزل، ناخده على مناطق أأمن شوي. بينما معظم الناس بطبيعتها لا بتحب الأرض وباقي بالأرض، وهلا إذا بتطلع بتلاقيهم عم بيحوشوا زيتون والحياة تقريبا طبيعية.
So he says that them as a municipality they are taking the measures to help out the civilians, and that's why they created with the ministry here, they created this what they call the crisis small cell, if you want, where they are looking for the civilians who are older or who are already sick or who cannot defend themselves or anything. And those civilians, yes, they are preparing for if there are casualties or anything, because he says one thing very important: the Israeli do not make it different if it is a hospital or not a hospital, they're gonna hit whatever. So those people, they are asking them, or they are taking them in places that are a bit more secure, so outside of the village.
Mm-hmm.
But the other people who are here, who are healthy, they want to stay home. So, and he said if you want to go look around, you're going to see that they have a lot of olive trees, and people are actually, because it's time of olive harvesting, so they're harvesting the olives right now, and they're living a life, normal life.
خلينا نقول للناس مش بحالة خوف وهلع، بس بحالة حذر وانتباه.
So people are not panicking, people are not going crazy about the situation, but people are being cautious.
So there's one final question I'd like to ask you. I hope it'll be my final question because I know you don't have much time. The Israeli government is telling the world, and Western governments are agreeing with the Israeli government's claim that the cause of the current violence in Gaza is an attack that was launched on Israel by Hamas militants, which resulted in the deaths of hundreds of soldiers and even more civilians. This is the Israeli government's position, and that is the cause of the violence and the destruction in Gaza that Israel has inflicted upon Gaza since October 7th. What is your view about the cause of the violence in Gaza?
بدي أسألك هيدا السؤال اللي هو اللي الإسرائيلية عم بيقولوا، اللي الدولة الإسرائيلية عم بتقول، وأكيد الدول الأجنبية عم بتقول ذات الشيء، إنه اللي بلشت الحرب هلا بقلب غزة، اللي سببت الحرب بقلب غزة، هو مش شغلة هو عم بيقولها، بس شغلة عم بيقول إنه الدولة الإسرائيلية عم بتقولها، نتجت من الحماس اللي فاتوا على إسرائيل وقتلوا 100 جندي وأكثر مدنية، ومن هيدا الوقت بلشت الحرب، هن اللي سببوا الحرب. بده يعرف أنت شو موقفك بهيدا الموضوع، هل أنت بتقول إنه هيدا هو السبب أو لا؟
طول بالك علي بالإجابة.
You have to he has to take his time and he's going to think of how to answer.
Okay. إنه هيدا هو الموضوع الأساسي بهيدي الأزمة كلها اللي عم نمر فيها.
Because this is
وليس هجوم هزة.
This is actually exactly the subject that is the core of the subject. You're asking about the core of the subject, and it's not really the attack on Gaza, but it's really the core of the subject.
يعني نحن بس عم نحكي إنه هلا ما عم نرجع لخلفية الهجوم ما قبل التراكمات السابقة. يعني الشعب احتلت أرضه واغتصبوا أرضه عنوة. شعب عنده تاريخ وعنده تراث وعنده من أيام النبي موسى لهلا اثنينات، يعني خلينا نقول الشعب الفلسطيني بكافة مشاربه عايش بأرض بسلام وبنعيم، جيت أنت اغتصبت له أرضه واحتليته.
This is not something that I can answer like this, because if you just take this event, what happened, the event, you forget all the things that happened before getting to this event. And let's go back to the Palestinians who were living in a land that were theirs, where they were happy, they were actually peace, they were peaceful people, they had a history, they had a place to live, and people came in and they violated the rights and took the lands and took the land and continued and continued and continued on it. So we have to put this stuff in context.
من سنين، عشرات السنين عم يتعرض حتى يعني بهيدي البقعة الضيقة اللي عايش فيها عدد من الكيلومترات وعايش فيها مليونين شخص للقتل اليوم والوحش، وبيتعرضوا له لا غذاء، لا حياة كريمة لبشر. أفش إنسان بشر إنساني بالمطلق بيقدر يعيش هيدي العيشة اللي عم بتعيشها، بالرغم من كل هذا ضيقت عليه بجدار وعم تمنع عنه حتى الهواء يتنفسه. شو المطلوب منه يعمل؟
With the history, you have 2 million people living in a very small land. They took all the land and they put them all together in a very small land. And the small land where they cannot even breathe, they have to even pay for the breathing. They don't have electricity, they don't have the basic rights and everything. So in his opinion, any human being would be more than frustrated because all the rights were completely gone.
والدليل التاريخ بيعلمنا، يعني اللي عملوه أهل غزة أو عملوه الناس بغزة ردة فعل وليس فعل.
So if you talk about history, what the people of Gaza did is not an action, it's a reaction.
هتلر احتل العالم. تستغرب على الشعوب الأوروبية ليش كانت تقاوم، ترجع أرضها، ترجع حق طبيعي.
When Hitler attacked all the world and tried to violate the rights of people, why don't we question how the Europeans acted against what he was doing?
أنا كلبناني وعايش بهذه المنطقة، لو ما في مقاومة واستعادت وهجمت وردتهم ورجعتهم ما كنت بقدر أرجع على الأرض، وهذا دليل تاني.
My second proof is to tell you I'm Lebanese and I live in this village, but if there was no resistance who pushed back the enemy and gave me a bit of safety, I couldn't come back to my land.
الحل الوحيد هو إرجاع العالم بحقه. أهالي فلسطين ياخذوا حقوقهم كاملة بقلب فلسطين، وهوليك محل ما اجوا يرجعوا، ما في مشكلة.
The only solution is to give back the rights to Palestinians, to give them their rights and the land back, and those people who came to the land, let them go back to where they came from.
يعني أنا امبارح سمعت خبر بوكالة الصحافة إنه إجا امبارح واحد يهودي من إسرائيلي من أمريكا إجا امبارح، كانت خدمته هون بالحدود الشمالية وانقتل. طيب شو جابوا من أمريكا ليقتلهم؟
Yesterday he actually saw on the news that there was this Israeli American who came actually to Lebanon, and he was here to apparently cover the news, and he was killed here. Why did he come from the States to here to be killed here on the border?
Killed in the attack by the Palestinian militant unit.
So هو قتل من الفلسطينيين.
انقتل على الحدود اللبنانية هون.
ايه بس انقتل من مين؟ من قبل مين؟
المقام اللي كانوا عم يردوا قصفوا من موقع هون بكفرشوبة، قاموا ردوا عليهم وقتلوه بجنون.
So
الإسرائيلية هيك زيهم.
الإسرائيلي قتلوه أو
لا،
المقاومة؟
قتلته كان عم بيشارك بضرب المناطق الجنوبية
So he was apparently, he says that's what he read. He was apparently helping the Israeli to attack the region of Kfar what we saw now. And it's the resistance, the Lebanese resistance who killed him while they answered back after the attack.
Yeah, how do the people, and this will be my last question, I
هذا
promise.
آخر سؤال خلاص.
In your community, in Taybeh, and I realize there may be different points of view, but how do you think most people in your community feel about the Palestinian problem and the Palestinian people?
هو هذا آخر سؤال صعب. هو الناس اللي هون الناس اللي حواليك أو الناس اللي هون بالمنطقة كيف بيشوفوا الفلسطينيين وكيف بيشوفوا you want to know how they see the Palestinian in general or how they see
How they feel towards the Palestinian people and particularly the situation they currently find themselves in. What is the general attitude
so
of
they
this
يعرف
community?
إنه الناس اللي عايشة هون والناس اللي حواليك والناس اللي بجوارهم شو علاقتهم أو كيف بيحسوا شيء أو شو بيحسوا مع الفلسطينية ومع القضية الفلسطينية ومع الأحداث اللي عم بتصير هون يعني مش بس هون بلبنان بس كمان بغزة وغيرها.
أكيد بدها في تعاطف قوي بالمظلومية، لأننا عايشين المظلومية كنا بأيام الاحتلال ونعرف ما معنى الاحتلال وما معنى العدوانية وما معنى القهر وما معنى الذل اللي كانوا عايشيننا فيه، ودفعنا ثمن غالي جدا جدا لحتى نتخلص من هذا العدو.
We are actually on the same track completely and we feel with the Palestinians because we are also people that know what is frustration, what is to remove our rights, what is actually to live in a war, and this is something that we feel with them. We actually feel with them and like them what is happening right now.
مشان هيك نحن كشعب أكيد وأنا من جملتهم يعني نتعاطف بشكل قوي مع الفلسطينيين من جراء هذا الظلم اللي عم بيتعرضوا له، لأنه كنا نحس فيه ونعرف قديش كلفته وكلفة التضحيات حتى تفك هذه المظلومية عن شعب.
I'm one of them and I'm actually one of those people who feel with the Palestinians because again I lived and I saw and I still live in the fear, but also because I live in the fear because they already took my identity and I want it back. So I feel with them and I feel with the Palestinians.
Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today. I wish you peace.
هو بيتمنى لك أهم شيء هو السلام.
بتأكدنا من السلام.
We all want peace.
بس بكرامتنا.
But we want peace. بكرامة meaning with pride and don't remove our pride.
ولكل الناس بنتمنى السلام.
And we want the peace for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much.